everyone. We're here. You're here for the Tech Development Demystified webinar. So we're going to let maybe pause for a few minutes and let everyone join since we're right at the bottom of the hour, and then we're going to get started. Hope everyone is doing well on this fine Tuesday morning. As for me, the sun is shining, sky is blue. Had a good Easter weekend. How about you, Phu? How was your Easter?
It was a great Easter weekend. My daughter is still very. She went from wondering where the Easter bunny is to where's my Easter basket. So she's learned that she can ignore the Easter bunnies to get the basket. Um, However, in Florida here, it was still under 90 degrees in April. So we took a nice
Mm,
long walk last night just to enjoy it before the heat and humidity overwhelms us the next
mm.
3 weeks.
Yeah, it was hot here in Houston too on Easter. Whew. Sorry for all those up north. All right, so we're 2 minutes past the time. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to do this over about a 30-minute period. You're here on for a 30-minute webinar that builds on part one of our series on demystifying technical development. My name is Chris Howard. I'm the founder and CEO of Softeq, which is a full stack hardware and software innovation and engineering firm that's been building products for startups and the Fortune 500 for nearly 3 decades. And joining me today is Phu Nguyen. Phu and I met many years ago when we were delivering a product for Disney. And after a career at both Disney and Universal Studios, he's now joined Softeq as a product solutions manager. I know Fu spent much of his time in theme parks, but now one of his major projects for Softeq involves correctional facilities. So, welcome to the real world, Fu.
Yes, they're both captured audiences. So
Yeah, I don't know. There's probably maybe theme parks could be described as a prison for some people, but so anyway, while our previous session covered the journey from ideation to proof of concept, today we're going to explore the critical path from defining project scope to successful production for both software and hardware technologies. And throughout this presentation, we'll share practical examples from industry leaders and illustrate real world applications of these principles. So let's demystify the development process together. Also, as you're listening, feel free to use our chat on the side. There's icons on the right. We also have 3 poll questions, which you can answer at any time during the presentation. And if you have a question for us, we will have a Q&A at the end. There's a little question icon on the right. Just type in your question, and then other people can upvote your question. We'll answer the ones that get the most upvotes first. All right. So, journey overview. As I mentioned, we covered the ideation and proof of concept phases in part one. If you missed that, be sure to check out the Softeq LinkedIn page for the recording. And in this webinar, we're going to cover the steps from scope definition to production. And like I said, answer those questions and get those polls out. So, our journey in this part, there's a lot of steps, quite a few things involved in this part for both hardware and software projects. And we're going to cover defining scope, selecting providers, project management, testing, certification, manufacturing, and finally production. And we have a lot to cover. So let's get started. So defining project scope, right? So this is a critical step to ensure clarity and alignment among stakeholders. And it involves detailing the project's deliverables, features, and boundaries, which helps in planning, resource allocation, and preventing scope creep, right? So research suggests that a well-defined scope reduces misunderstanding and sets clear expectations, as noted in project management best practices. And so, as far as processes, it's gathering techniques such as interviews and surveys and workshops, creating a scope statement or a project charter to document the agreed upon deliverables. This is super important. Some people feel like most of your work should go up front in the planning phase before you actually, get started, as, trying to figure out where you're going is more important. then getting the engine started. For software, it involves user stories and acceptance criteria, user needs and task management. And for hardware, it's more about specifying design requirements, materials, and performance criteria. And Fu, I think you have some experience as far as Disney. Disney had a very, very detailed specification document with requirements that were like 1.2.3.4.5. The product must do this, right? But they don't all have that. So maybe
Yeah.
if we talk a little bit about that background.
Yeah, sometimes if you have an internal tech team that can assist, then you would end up with something that Chris described, the response time in milliseconds, things like that. But if you have an idea and you want to get to a certain point, your definition, defining scope could be performance wise. You write the performance scope and say, this when I press this button, I expect it to see here. If I click it twice, this is the destination I want to get to. So you define your scope by performance, what you like to see in that interaction, and then the technical team, whoever your partner was, come back and say, hey, we can do this for you based upon your performance specification. That way, and that should always be like that. Don't say, oh, we'll come back with you when the product's done, because you may not get the performance you want if you don't talk about that ahead of time. Because what you think 2-click is may be different than what someone else's version when you get to the final software or hardware interface. So it's very critical. I mean, it can be monotonous and very detail oriented, but if you don't define that ahead of time, put the work up front, you're gonna have something that you may or may not like. So that is a very critical step in to make sure the rest of it is successful.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, a lot of that comes out of that proof of concept phase that we had in the last webinar, to figure out how the product needs to perform and make any changes to the requirements. But if you don't have a team like Disney had with multiple engineers to write a detailed specification like that, that's where Softeq, for example, will come in and do a discovery phase, right? So we can help and utilize our business analysts and our solution architects to work with the client to define the requirements, the output of which is a project specification. And this spec can then be used to quote the project development, whether it's with Softeq or anybody else. So don't be too concerned. You don't need to create a huge document if you don't have experience in doing that. That's something that we can help you with. Okay. Now the next part, as far as defining the project scope, um, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Clear boundaries, detailed requirements, and then also, most importantly, the stakeholder alignment. And this is all things that people might not think about when you're actually trying to get to the fun part, which is creating the software, the mobile app, or the hardware. But it's very important to have this project scope lined out. Next, my favorite, the 3 variable balancing act. There's 3 main knobs that you can turn in any software or hardware project. That's features, time, and cost. Now, of course, almost every client wants all 3 of those. They want the most features in the shortest time for the least amount of money. And that is something we all aspire to do. But when it comes down to actually developing the product, you have to understand what's most important, what's defining success. Sometimes it's like, we have to ship this project by August, or we're dead. That means then you have to tweak the features you're gonna include in the product. You're not going to build version 3.0. You want to build version 1.0 and ship on time. Or you might have to add more money, which is the cost part, because you want to accelerate the schedule and development time. Although, like Fu likes to say, you can't have a baby with 9 women. So
1 month.
sometimes adding, well, unless you're Elon Musk, apparently. But
Yeah.
no, you can't create 1 baby with 9 women.
Yep.
1 woman can have 8 babies, apparently. But anyway, the point is, you have to turn those other knobs, and you need to pick a priority. Maybe features are the most important. That means you're going to maybe extend the runway on time. Might also mean you're going to have added cost. So you just have to keep this in mind. We see a lot of clients trying to build version 3.0 instead of building version 1.0, shipping the product, making at least one client insanely happy, and then iterating from there. As an example, we have our Pause Halo client. is on version 4 of their collar now. Over the last 4 years, they've iterated 4 times on their hardware, and they've reduced the size multiple times and added features over that lifetime of that product based on feedback from their clients. All right, so keep that in mind. And that's also helpful for your development partner to tell them which thing is most important to you. It might be budget. If it's budget, then again, you maybe turn the knob down on features. All right, selecting a solution provider, hugely important, of course. You need to look for their technical expertise, their track record, their user experience capability, and also their communication. This is all critically important in any supplier that you're selecting. If you're going to evaluate a provider, make sure you review portfolios, check client testimonials on platforms like Clutch, conduct interviews, maybe talk to some past clients, request proposals, look for testimonials that highlight experience, responsiveness, and quality. And for projects of a similar size and scope, and whether they delivered on time within budget. It turns out if you do what you said, when you said, for how much you said, clients tend to come back. Maybe if we talk a little bit about, when you selected Softeq, when you were at Disney, what you were looking for.
Well, we were looking for basically what you said was who could vouch for you. One of which is based on experience, and back then, Compaq said, what, Softeq did a great job for us in these areas, and it seemed to align with what we're looking for in developing the product we're looking for 20 something years ago. So with that type of review, let's just say, we're not on Yelp, but with that
The
type
blessing.
of
Yeah.
another company saying, yeah, we've dealt with Softeq and they were a great partner. They helped us through these steps. That was a great, um, basically, um, they vouch for you.
Endorsement. Well,
Endorsement.
and it does come down to trust, right? Do you trust this provider to, deliver your product for you?
Yep. And back then also, Softeq was very agile in our needs, where Compaq was a pretty larger company. And that's, Softeq could meet your needs much quicker because of a more
Mhm,
agile company also at that point.
mhm. And just one other important point here, it's critical for the client to identify a product owner. This isn't someone that's acting as a project manager. It's a product owner is making the decisions on hardware and software features and trade-offs as the project unfolds that meet the needs of the business, right? So this ensures the project stays on track and within budget and meets deadlines. But you need to, have an owner on the product, the client side, in order to make those decisions. And as Fu pointed out to me earlier, milestone review and client acceptance, very, very important. As the provider provides those, milestone checkpoints, what are the client acceptance procedures of those milestones? We always had to pass a pretty stringent. Fu is pretty tough, actually. Yeah.
Every time
Uh,
we met, I had like a 3-page list of just, so many items I had to check off. And there was a group of engineers sitting behind me saying, yeah, yes, no, to go along with it. So,
I forgot that. Yeah, you did. You always had this very long checklist and go through before you would let us move on to the next phase.
and that's part of the
Okay.
detailing you need to know as a customer, whether you go through it the first time or the second or third time, is that, we're here to make sure that what you need is successful. And not having those checklists, we might be missing something, but if a checklist, your checklist and our checklist should match. If they don't,
Yeah.
then let's go back and talk about this.
Yeah, there is definitely scope creep and, hey, that wasn't in the spec and, but you need some collaboration with a partner because there's going to be some amount of changes as you go through a project. And so you can't be very extremely literal on the spec. But on the other hand, the client can't change the scope too much. Like, oh, yeah, we weren't building a sedan. We actually wanted a Ferrari. It's like, well, that's going to take a little bit of retooling. So let's talk a little bit about managing the project. So, obviously managing the project is essential to navigating the development process. Methodologies do vary between software and hardware. Software tends to be more agile and iterative. Hardware is more waterfall and sequential. And obviously it has to be because hardware tends to be a little less flexible as you go along to changes. Key aspects to look for, planning and scheduling, which means you want to set those milestones and timelines. You don't want to just say, okay, let's look at this 6 months from now and see where we're at. You need to agree on what those, monthly or quarterly milestones are. Resource allocation, risk management. How do we mitigate certain issues, which can be like supplies of parts or someone, randomly deciding to create some tariffs on your product, and where are you getting it manufactured, and how's that going to impact your cost? All those things don't really, apply to the tech. I remember on many projects, including the one we did with Disney. We were working with Disney and HP, and they're, like Fu said, very big companies. And the check was flowing from Disney to HP to Softeq. Well, halfway through, the cash wasn't going through that pipeline. And one of the most challenging aspects of delivering that project on time, which we ultimately did, was the cash flow, not the technology, right? And so a lot of things can impact the product development that are outside the actual hardware and software. Um, okay, moving on. We talked about the product owner already. Software testing, obviously very, very vital to ensure the product's reliable. You need to have, not just experiential testing. Like obviously, you as the client, you're going to test the app and you're going to use it, but there's a lot more to testing than just that. You need to have unit testing, integration, system testing, user acceptance tests, right? UAT. And you need to really implement a defect tracking system. First of all, your provider integrator should either give you that, or if you're a larger company, you might already have a defect tracking system. Everything needs to go into that, and then it needs to be managed and prioritized, and then what bugs you're going to actually fix, and which bugs are a stop ship or not. You might be surprised to learn, or not surprised to learn, most software ships with bugs. I think Windows 2000 or something shipped with some, 50,000 bugs or something. So you got a company like Microsoft developing, one of the best software companies out there. They're still shipping product. Well, because you just can't fix absolutely, the software's just never quite done, right? But you have to decide what's a stop ship issue, right? Does it crash the program? Does it crash the desktop? Does it crash the app, for example? That's going to be a stop ship. The button is blue, you're not necessarily going to stop shipping the product because, that it's the wrong shade. So Fu, both in hardware and software, you mentioned before having a well-defined test plan
Mhm.
along with the acceptance criteria, right? When
Yeah.
we delivered like those headsets to you, I mean, what were you doing?
We part of that was site acceptance testing, or rather preliminary testing, where we took it out to, hey, what would a guest do? They would throw it on the ground, they drop it, they stuff it in their bag. How would they wear it? So all that stuff was trying to predict what the user's doing with your product. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in your mind, from a software perspective, oh no, they're going to click here, they're going to go here, they're going to go here. Proper testing is, I'm going to click everywhere and see if I can crash it or not. I want to do something that it's not meant to do and see if it's recoverable or not. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that is those type of testing that says, that's where Chris pull out his hair because, hey, so
It's
that
all
you weren't
done.
meant to do that. And I'm like, yeah, we do. People don't know they're supposed to go there, but yeah. Or
Yeah, those theme parks are shredders. I mean, you got humidity, rain, heat, all-day battery life, 4-foot drop testing, sunscreen, kids. I mean, it's just, the stuff's going to get beat up, and mechanically, you need to, have that. And then, of course, performance-wise, does it perform in the direct sunlight? Does it perform indoors? Does it, correctly locate, within the ride? Does it play the audio within a certain time frame?
yep.
Uh, there's a lot that goes into that acceptance, and then you need to hold your system integrator, accountable when it's not meeting those guidelines according to your spec.
I think all the broken headset when you first deliver because we didn't quite pick the right plastics yet. Didn't quite survive the
Mm-hmm.
4-foot drop test. But
Yeah,
eventually, after multiple 4-foot, drop tests, this plastic survived. This is a good one here.
Yeah, it was more the flexibility of that headband because it had to fit, again, children up to, big-headed adults, and so there was some flexibility requirements, and but you couldn't have it too flexible because then the headset would fall off. So that was a materials challenge on that product, and fortunately we did solve that product problem, but it was an interesting one.
Yep.
Speaking of hardware, definitely a different animal from software. You need functional performance, reliability, and compliance testing. And all this usually requires specialized equipment and environments to simulate real world conditions. There's chambers that check for emissions but having the comprehensive testing in each development phase, helps identify issues early and reduces costly fixes later in the production process. So as much as you can test earlier on to simulate those real world environments, because you don't want to get all the way to the end, deliver the headsets, be in the parks, and then having issues. Right?
Yeah, part of
It's an
this also
expensive.
is it a consumer product or an industrial product that is shared by different users? So that different mindset or different view of it, if it's a consumer product, then basically when someone buys it, it's their personal item and they use it. It could be a industrial product where, let's say, a sensor is being used by different people, different team members, and their size and how they grip things and hold things are different also. So when you use a shared product like that, you have to consider who are the users, and if they share this one sensor, because it's $10,000 sensor, not everyone's going to get a sensor. So they
Yeah.
check in, check out. So that type of thing, how do you test that? You and compare those notes. So it's different when your mindset when you're developing consumer product and or industrial product.
Mm. Yeah, good point. Okay, talk about testing. Well, certifications is a definite big item in hardware, right? Hardware certifications like UL for safety, CE for European market access, FCC are common for electronics, while medical devices require FDA approval or HIPAA compliance. Financial software may need PCI and DSS, and all this needs to be baked into the schedule because in a lot of these cases, the testing has to be performed on really as the final product. I remember when we did a second project with Disney, and it was a ruggedized handheld, which we were basing on an iPac mobile. Even though the iPac had all those certifications, we were putting it in a different case, a different ruggedized case, and adding some extra goodness and electronics in there. And we couldn't do some of the emission, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, radio frequency testing that was required with kind of like the pre-production molds, right? Because it wasn't the final plastics. And if you're doing that all at the end, and obviously you have to build in time if some of those come back and you need to make some changes or iterations, or you have on-body testing, both in the headset and the handheld. For some reason, Disney didn't want to give their guests brain cancer, right? So you had to actually test the emissions of the headset to make sure they were within acceptable health limits. So planning in for those certifications and having a partner that has experience in getting those is very important. They take time. They need to be scheduled in advance. You may say you get it into the lab and they're like, yeah, we can get it in next month. It's like going to the doctor, right? That no one's ever available tomorrow, but build time in for retesting as well, because you're going to have to get those logos on the sticker. Um, you don't want to just get a supplier that puts the UL on the sticker and calls it a day. But, all right. And Fu, I know you like to plan for compliance as well. Any comments on the compliance side of things?
Yeah, I mean, basically all you what you just said right there, and just you need a trusted partner to do some of those. You like you said, yield itself. Those are electrical panels and things like that that could actually be careful when you open those up. Depending on if you're putting an infrastructure in place, or basically transmission power. FCC, CE, things that says, am I transmitting within the agreeable limit? So those you truly need to make time for, and your packaging does matter as far as the strength of those signals comes out of those boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Good point. Also, manufacturing partners, right? Who's going to manufacture when it comes to hardware? I mean, software is a little easier. Of course, in my day, I was having to do like floppy disk duplications and manual printing. Now you throw the manual and the software on the internet and say download it. But when it comes to hardware, you do need a manufacturing partner. You need to consider geography, labor laws, tariffs, shipping, timing costs. You need to look at quality standards, locations for logistics. You need to find the right manufacturing partner because it's crucial for hardware production. Have they built these products before? Not every manufacturer has done a phone or a wearable or a set-top box or whatever it is that you're building, and select one that has experience in the type of product that you're developing. Softeq is not a manufacturer itself, but we work with a lot of contract manufacturers, whether they're in Taiwan or Korea or China or nearshore in Latin America. So look for partners also that understand hardware design for manufacturability. Is this product designed to be manufactured? Can it be tooled? How many parts are they using? How is it assembled? Right. So even if you're not the contract manufacturer, you need to, when you're throwing this over the wall to someone that's going to build the thing, you need to know how they're going to build it and what they typically expect, or there's going to be a lot of rework involved. Like, why does it need 52 screws or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Does it need seals for water ingress and things like that? So, and then you need to have. See, does that partner have a QAP? What's a QAP, Fu?
The quality assurance program. That's one of the first thing you should ask the manufacturer, because if they don't have a quality assurance program, then what are you getting at the end? They should have a very detailed document about how they control the source material that's coming in, any kind of raw material. Basically, the ability to go back to what is the batch they're getting from and where the source they're getting from. The chipset goes back to either Qualcomm, Nordic, or other manufacturer that you can actually chase those down, because if Qualcomm say, hey, we have a problem with this chipset and this is batch. Whoa, is that in my product or or
Mm-hmm.
not? So having that ability to traceability go back that far is what you need to have, and the quality assurance program from those manufacturers will provide that. Part of that also is you need to understand that a manufacturer could be multiple things. They may not do everything in house. So depending on what you're looking for, they could be a systems integrator where they have an assembly where they outsource all these other smaller stuff, and then they bring everything in house to assemble. Having that understanding who their sub suppliers are is very critical also to getting a quality product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Yeah, and then managing that process. I mean, you do need to oversee your production processes. Like Fu said, you need to make sure they have a QAP and that they have logistics and supply chain and who their sub suppliers are. There's the thing of BOMs, which is bill of materials, which is component sourcing. You need to mitigate obsolescence and end of life in those components. Another hardware project we were doing for actually with doing Disney, we'd based it on an iPac. That iPac went end of life in the middle of the project, right? So we were trying to, leverage that technology and then add the goodness, but then it went end of life, and then we had to go back and say, well, look, we need to switch horses on this. And good thing we did, because in the end, it cost us a month or so to take a step back and redesign. But in the long term, that the iPac model we chose ended up lasting for like the next 5 plus 6 plus years or longer.
They were using that thing for a decade. So, what industrial products last for over a decade, right? Most
Mm-hmm.
electronics last, what, 18 months, 2 years?
Yeah.
A ruggedized product lasts for a decade or more.
Well, and we mitigated some of that too by we knew when the product did eventually go end of life, we did an end of life buy
Yep.
from HP on that product because we knew we were going to want to manufacture those handhelds in the future and provide parts and rework.
Yeah.
So I mean, Phil, how do you get that close oversight of a manufacturing process when the factory is 5,000 miles away and wherever?
So there are third-party quality houses that will inspect those per your specification. So there are, UL teams out there over the world. I said, here, I want you to go and inspect my product in this factory, and that needs to be agreed upon with the manufacturer. And they said, hey, my team will come in there on this date, or based upon your schedule, we will be in there to inspect, and we need samples from you all. So having a third party independent contractor, let's say overseas in Korea, Taiwan, where your base is, they will do that inspection for you and send you a detailed report to that so that you're not there. But a lot of times you may want to take that effort over yourself if you have a quality team and inspection so that you can do a factory acceptance test based upon when the production level is at. And the thing about the bill of material is, I want to touch upon that, is that you may have a bill of material, but when you go to hire a production company or manufacturer, say, hey, we'd like to substitute these items because these are not sourceable right now due to just delayed manufacturing. So you should be able to review what they're suggesting and make sure that the components are the same. Because even though you're off by, I don't know, certain type of voltage and things, it could really impact the overall PCB. So be careful when they say we want to do substitution on your bill of material. Um,
Mm.
but part of that is it's understandable. So if you have a great partner that understands those impacts to it, then that's where you want to say the bill of material is really critical when you're doing hardware designs like that overseas. But there's
Yeah.
always, to get back to the original question, there are quality control companies that go out there, third party, that will inspect it per your specification. Don't just tell them go inspect this. They'll say, what do we inspect it to?
Hmm.
Give us definitions so we can make
That's
sure
where you
that
need that
pass fail.
spectrum. Yeah. And then, yeah, obviously, if and when you can, you do want to go, especially right before the first article going on production when they start rolling off the line. If you can go and see what those first articles look like and make any last minute tweaks, but having someone during the whole process of the hardware development that can go by the factory and see how tooling is coming and seeing how they're actually being your eyes and ears on the ground when you're not there all of the time. Okay, so wrapping up here pretty quick. Production and final delivery, right? So, the final production phase requires that careful oversight to ensure the quality and timely delivery for hardware. Like I said, being on site during initial production provides quick feedback on first articles and adjustments. And then remember to implement systems for things like over-the-air firmware updates to support field maintenance. One thing you don't want to do is ship a hardware product out into the field that you can't update the firmware on, and then you've got bricked devices that are going to be coming back to you. So take the extra time to build in things like bootloaders and having a process that, like, how do we update these devices in the field? Is someone going to have to go around and plug in a USB and download firmware, or can we do this over the air? For software, it's establishing deployment procedures and user training resources and ongoing support mechanisms. Online applications require development servers, for example, for the programmers, and testing servers for QA, and then production servers for the clients. You can't, so basically, your infrastructure on the back end is like 3x what you're actually doing on the production environment, because you don't want to roll out development code when your client is using your software. So just make sure for both hardware and software you have alignment on the original scope, you have those quality standards, and you have those deadline commitments to ensure a successful market introduction.
So it also depends on your hardware. If you're doing small quantities that you can ship, I mean, you can always put a container for one and ship a whole container. But even if you're shipping a container, that's 30 days on the water plus potentially 2 weeks in import export when you get to the dock. Or if you're small enough, you can actually air freight it over, which is much quicker. But of course, you pay the cost for the air freight, so it's time and cost. So build that into your schedule, and where you receive the production from. If you're doing a small run, you may want to receive it on the factory floor. So we say, okay, they can still arrange the shipping company for you, but your acceptance is on the factory floor, and that's where you say, hey, I'm going to go there. I'm going to count all my boxes, make sure everything's in here, make sure the packaging looks good. Yep, I have everything here, and the shipping, the manufacturer can still arrange all the shipping to your dock, but the final acceptance is on the floor. You still pay for shipping, of course. The other part
Mm-hmm.
is that tells you that you're getting a product you're satisfied with. The other part is if you want to receive it in the dock here in your warehouse, you don't want to open up and go, wait a minute, we got to ship all this back because this is the the wrong packaging, wrong whatever. And you're like, okay, that's another 6 weeks delay potentially or more. So be
Yeah, for the
careful
price of a
how.
plane ticket to get out there and be able to be there at the factory and review it and not have it shipped, pay all the shipping, and have a 6 to 8 week delay. You open the box and it's the wrong color or whatever. It doesn't turn on, whatever. Yeah.
But once they get it going, and every quarterly you get a shipment, the first one you want to be there, but maybe the next one not really because they've got that process in place already. So the first one's always critical to get what you need or want out of the manufacturing production, and know that shipping
Mhm.
time also.
Yep, exactly. All right, we're coming up on the end here. Key takeaways. Obviously, we've covered the 7 critical steps that go from scope definition to final delivery. A lot of things to coordinate and think of. Hardware and software is complicated. Um, Core variables, features, time, and cost. Those are the 3 things that, as a client, those are the knobs that you can turn. And so, just be aware when you're working with a system integrator, they're going to propose things to you based on what's important to you, right? Features or cost or time, and that you're going to have to collaborate on making any adjustments. And then the 2 main development paths for software and hardware, slightly different methodologies. Software is a little more flexible, hardware is a little more stringent, if you're going to land that plane on time, and on budget. Quick shameless plug, if you're not already following me on my podcast, Forging the Future, had over 100 episodes so far with thought leaders from investors to startup founders to, Fortune 500 entrepreneurs working at companies, all the way from, the CEO of Compaq to the CEO of Intuitive Machines, who landed us on the moon for the first time in 50 years. A lot of AI episodes in the last couple of weeks, both from a data standpoint and from how do you apply AI in different technologies, from sports tech and on up. So give it a listen. It's on all your favorite platforms, or just go to softeq.com/FTF, Forging the Future. And that's it for today. Other than your questions, we're excited to collaborate with you. Feel free to reach out at hello@softeq.com or give us a call on our 800 number. Anyone here that might want a free consultation on developing, your software or hardware, we're happy to talk to you. We don't start the shot clock just because we're having a conversation. So we're happy to discuss with you and, give you some idea on maybe what next steps were, on getting your idea and bringing your idea to life. All right. Looks like we have one question. This is an easy one. Um, you missed part one. Is the recording for that available as well? Yes, it is. Uh, and I don't know, Damon, if we had that link available to drop here, but one of the easiest ways is to go to LinkedIn, to the Softeq profile. You can follow us there. I think we've posted the link. I think it's also on our website. Is that right, Damon? Damon's behind the scenes.
It will be shortly. They're going to be getting an email. They'll have links to both recordings. Yes.
All right, great. Yeah, anybody that signed up, you'll get a link to part one, and you also get a link to part two here, the recording, in case you want to share it with someone on your team, or you want to watch it again, or if you have trouble sleeping and you want to play it at night. So, and that's it for now, it looks like. Oh, is Softeq active in AI deployments? Well, AI is a very hot topic and something that many of our clients are asking us for. I think that we're in the middle of like at least half a dozen projects where we're adding AI resources for everything from pet tech to sports tech to tech on AI. Edge AI also is a core um, uh, feature for Softeq, given its usage in IoT and smart devices and wearables. So yes, I would say in general, I'm not sure what you mean by deployment per se, but happy to talk to you about that and whether we have the right expertise, since AI is a pretty broad market. Middleware writers. Okay, this is from Jeff. Like tech writers, Jeff, like technical. technical writers? Is that what you want? Or for AI, an AI technical writer? ChatGPT is actually pretty good at writing. That actually can help you with technical specs, but we come in to help fine tune, any of that. So maybe schedule some time. We're happy to talk to you more, Jeff, about that. No wonder it's called hardware. Yes. Is the Venture Studio program back open? It is not currently open. We've done 5 cohorts of 60 plus companies. There's still an application process. So if you want to, at least get your name in the queue. The primary challenge has been the funding environment. As you can imagine, it's been pretty tough for venture funds, and so we raised and deployed about 20 million through the venture fund, and we're actively looking for our next funding to fund another couple cohorts. And most likely, we will be funding companies that have some aspect of AI. One of the companies that we funded in our portfolio recently raised a $3.2 million seed round, Equip.ai. And they had to turn away three other VCs who each wanted to put in 1.2 million. So it's not a hard requirement, but I think that it's something that we can lean into at Softeq, given that our focus is innovation and AI is leading edge. Oh, another question. Let's see here. Any advice on where to start looking for expert certification partners? Maybe Phu, you might have some ideas on that.
Not right on top of my head, but that we use a certification part like FCC, CE, UL.
Yeah, it does vary because there are, everyone's a little different. So is it UL testing, FCC testing, Wi-Fi wireless testing? Is it, mechanical testing, IP67 testing, and so I would selfishly say, reach out to us and explain a little bit more about what kind of testing you're looking for. And we're happy to make some recommendations. We're not a test house ourselves, so happy to help you and point you in the right direction, depending on what type of product you're developing.
Yeah, I mean, is it domestic or is it international? Because I think overseas you might be looking for TUV also, and not just UL. So depend on, is it global? Is it domestic? Is it international? But you reach out to us, and we'll point you in the right direction. Like Christopher, we're not ourselves. We can't certify the product, so we would work with someone to get it certified.
Yeah, exactly. Drop testing, strength testing, whether you can remove a band, for example, if you're maybe doing a product in a place that you don't want them to remove a band.
Work on that right now.
Yeah. So a good question, though. All right. Well, good. Let me see on the chat. Anything else? Sounds great with the application. Right. Okay. Well, thanks for attending, everyone. This was meant to be a 30-minute webinar. We're a little over time. Appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy day to listen to us on this. And if you didn't answer the polls, please take a quick look. And, we're here to help and provide advice. And, if it's also something that we can help you with, just let us know. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.